Good afternoon, everyone. Before we begin, I want to first welcome you all to Temple Bethel. I am Jonathan Beitch, I'm the rabbi here, and on this very important day, this solemn day, this day of remembrance, this day of really understanding what Alan meant to each of us, welcoming you here to our sanctuary, welcoming you online who are joining us as well. Before we begin, I wanted to make sure that folks took an opportunity, if you have a mobile phone with you, to please place it to silent. You do not need to turn it off. In fact, we ask you to keep your phone on, but we would appreciate the ringer just turned off for the period of time that we are here this afternoon in this memorial service. Also, at this time of transitioning through the pandemic, I noticed there's a minority of people wearing masks here today, and it's perfectly okay. In our synagogue, it is optional. Just want to remind people to be aware of people's personal space and how we congregate together and respect how each of us is observing this particular individual ritual that we participate in at this time. The program this afternoon, as you see, calls for a memorial service with a number of eulogies following me, and so we are happy to welcome you to the bima, that is to this pulpit. I don't need to invite you, but when you see your name, just come on up, and you're the next person to speak. These verses are from Psalm 51. Create a pure heart for me, O God, and place within me a steadfast spirit. Do not banish me from your presence, and please do not take your Holy Spirit away from me. Return to me the joy of your salvation. Let a vigorous spirit sustain me. To those who transgress, let me teach your ways, and permit those who stumble to return to you. Save me from injuries, O God. For you, O God, are my deliverer, and my tongue may ever sing forth your righteousness. Eternal God, open my lips, and let my mouth declare your praise. Again, that was Psalm 51. Alan Orenberg always had a story to share with me, his Wisconsin rabbi. And I presume he had similar tales to tell his beloved clergy in Florida as well, who I understand might be joining us online today. For it was Alan's nature to open up, to offer his heart, to exude joy and optimism and hope. And all of that and more is what we have come to observe and celebrate today. In our hearts there is sadness, to be sure. And as Marilyn and Kate and Rachel and Bea and Cecilia and Wyatt and Alan's nephews and cousins and friends will confirm, this is a moment in time that is grief-producing and difficult on various levels. But what makes these moments meaningful, I think, is Alan's indomitable spirit, part of which he bequeaths to us, and part of which belongs to this moment. And so as we are with you, we are with the family as well. I will make this point a couple of times today, that each of us, I think, in this sanctuary has a story to tell about Alan. Each of us has a moment that we shared with him, perhaps, but those moments the family may not know. So, not to unduly overburden Alan's family, but we are, as mourners, it's good to have people around us and embrace us. And if you all have a story to share with them, share it. Because as you share your encounters that you had with Alan, that will enable them to grow in appreciation of an already wonderful person whom they are remembering, whom we all are remembering today. Along with this broad embrace of family and friends, I think it was Alan's attitude toward life and helping people that also inspires us to imitate him and to pursue some of his life goals in his absence. we are left with a sense of sadness, to be sure. For there is likely so much more that we could have shared with Alan and that he could have shared with us. But let us also consider the goodness in Alan's life and the accomplishments and values that he demonstrates and bequeaths to us. We remember his joy, his integrity, his optimism, and the love he shared with his family and friends. The spirit that he implants in our hearts is that immortal spirit that sometimes our tradition speaks of when we say that we thank God for implanting an immortal spirit within our heart. And that helps to preserve us even at times of our sadness, even at times of our grief. For Alan's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever. For his companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, we give thanks. For the gifts of his heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and now is a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we offer gratitude to the source of life in him and in us. At this time of sadness, we listen to a few voices from sacred scripture and even modern-day words, perhaps, that bring us the ever-new message of God's nearness. It tells us of our kinship with the Creator in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. This is the 15th Psalm, and I think you may recognize Alan in these words. The psalmist wrote this, "Eternal God, who may live in your tent, who may dwell on your holy mountain? They who live without blame, who do what is right, whose hearts acknowledge the truth, whose tongues are not given to evil, who have never done harm to others or borne reproach for their neighbors, for whom cruelty is repugnant, but who honor those who fear God, who stand by their oaths even to their detriment, who have never lent money at interest or accepted a bribe against the innocent. They who act in this way shall never be shaken." This is the 23rd Psalm, a psalm of contentment in a way and reliance on a higher power to lead us through difficult moments. First in Hebrew and then in English. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, binot deshe yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yenahaleni, nafshi yishovev, yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begates al mavet, lo irara, ki ata imadi, shivtecha hu mishantecha, hema yenachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorerai, dishantav Hashem en roshi, kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti beveit Adonai le'orech yamim. In English, God is my shepherd, and so I lack nothing. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. God leads me in paths of righteousness for the sake of the divine name. And even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for God is with me. O God, your rod and your shepherd's staff, they comfort me. You have prepared for me a table of sustenance and joy, even in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the eternal God forever. And finally, these words are from the 3rd chapter of Ecclesiastes, who reminds us that the meaning of life is found not necessarily in the hopes and thoughts of tomorrow, although that's where our hearts sometimes lie, but also in the meaning of life that is found in the grateful acceptance and celebration of the realities and the regularities of life. These words and sentiments are likely familiar to you. To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to shun embraces, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to rupture and a time to sew together, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for bringing peace. As we begin to hear these words now about Alan, again reminding the community here who is here also in mourning, to share stories, and especially share them with Alan's family, because it is they too who will revel and they will treasure in what you experienced with Alan. Look, Jewish tradition reminds us that there are two kinds of giving generously. One in Hebrew is called tzedakah, or we would translate perhaps that as righteous giving, that we do simply because it's the right way we have to act toward another human being. We offer tzedakah because it is merely what we do in the normal course of human life. The other kind of generosity is generous and spontaneous giving of the heart. The Torah calls this terumah in Hebrew, which literally means an uplifting or a raising. Through a charitable act of elevating or terumah, we lift one another up. We raise others to places they may not be able to go on their own. We allow them to become better people, which in turn inspires them to help others. You literally encourage and inspire the growth of all humanity. Alan Orenberg was such a person, moved by his wits and his life experiences, who helped lift others toward their potential. And it was not always through gifts, meaning monetary largesse. It was through his genuine and authentic love of humanity that he sought to share with others around him. He believed that a relationship with another person could be the catalyst for great love and ultimate peace. The philosopher Martin Buber tells us that when a relationship develops that is based on true love and intention, that relationship creates space for God in that relationship and in the world. Alan's soul brought God into the relationships he developed. He may not have realized it, but it did. He generously displayed his generosity, and he broadly embraced those around him. Someone uneducated in Alan might say that that applied perhaps only for people he loved, that he shared himself in such an intimate way, but those who know Alan would say that he literally felt this way toward all humanity, that there were no second stringers, and that everyone deserved the embrace of people in order to survive in this complex world. I used that baseball pun intentionally, by the way, but part of this learning came from personal experience. As a young person, Alan tended to be sort of on the heavy side, and there were many in his school and social milieu who teased and humiliated him. But from this individual familiarity with prejudice, he learned that the degradation of people and the debasement that follows were enemies of human advancement and needed to be confronted in every context and in every arena. When working for the Big Brothers and Big Sisters in Boston and then here in Madison, he found, for example, that gay men could not become big brothers. And whether fear or bigotry was the root of that problem, Alan was part of promoting that change, and he did so in the Boston program. It was he who created that, and I understand it was among the first of branches of Big Brothers and Big Sisters to remove and to make a change in that part of their organization. Alan loved to learn, reading, absorbing news, looking out for the oppressions of the world, learning through hard-knock experiences, as well as through the microaggressions that we're familiar with of everyday human life, that life itself needed to be improved, and that he needed to be part of that change. His optimism never faltered, even though he realized in his later years that there were newer concepts and ideas that he supported, but within which he could not be active. And there was some disappointment, but he knew that this was okay because his heart, his soul, his very breath, in Hebrew one would say his neshama and his intention were always pointed in the correct direction. First and foremost, he had love of family. One can see this from the way that his children and his life partner speaks about him, about their nicknames they have for him, about their observing his love in the baseball Red Sox of his youth or the Brewers in later life, or his passion for good food. I think from Fraboni's was one example that I can think of. From Kate, he learned a thing or two about her artistic and drawing abilities. From Rachel, he learned to never make a bet when a new car is on the line. His son-in-law's abilities in the kitchen might have overwhelmed him in a positive way, and his grandchildren endeared him to them. He was fortunate to know great love of family within which he thrived and grew and taught. And he still teaches us, even though through this day and into the future. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, a firm link in the venerated chain of Jewish Hasidism, once said this. He said it was an awesome obligation to be always joyful, to cause oneself to overcome and to distance oneself from sadness, depression, and gloom, and to exhibit a broken heart only at certain times. Even though Alan strove to improve the world through serious and hard-fought battles, he was a man, as I've said before, of great joy and spirit. He had a positive outlook for the potential for this world, and his family love showed him how good life can be when people around showed love by reaching out, by holding them, and by letting them know that they truly matter. It is this spirit of enthusiasm, optimism, and joy that reminds me of Alan and the teachings that he leaves us as we continue to miss him. For Rabbi Nachman, expressions of joy were particularly important, and for him, during the anti-Semitic issues that were going on in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, where he lived in Eastern Europe, he led his people to consider life as a gift. In our remembrance of Alan, continuing today and through the rest of our lives, we will always consider his positive outlook, his teaching of warmth, his broad expressions of humanity, because it was these attitudes and how he expressed them toward the world that allowed him to grow and flourish and learn, search for new relationships, and to return joy to all the people with whom he shared it. I hope these are part of what we experience today and what we remember. Catherine?
I had my sister print this out this morning. I will be representing unfortunately, the entire immediate family, so no pressure. Oh, okay.
You can stand up.
Can I? Are we good?
I think that's good.
Are we good?
It's not your nose.
No, I'm fine. Can you guys hear me? I feel like I'm on a WebEx call at work. Can you hear me? All right. I was trying to think how my dad might start this, and I think I got it. So there was this old Jewish couple. One day at breakfast, the husband looks over at his wife and says, "Nope, not going to do it." I can tell by the laughter that you guys recognize a Alan joke. I never met anybody who could tell a joke like my dad. It didn't matter if it was good or bad. Old or new, he could have told the joke like 10,000 times, and each time he'd tell it with the exact same enthusiasm as the first time, which is especially true of the bad jokes. I don't think anything made my dad happier than making someone laugh or smile. One night last year at the end of a phone call where he talked passionately with me about politics and the state of the world and how he's concerned about the Wisconsin elections. And he then proceeded to tell me in rapid succession 2 of the worst jokes that I've ever heard, with a delivery that would make a seasoned vaudevillian jealous. I said, "You've been waiting all day to unleash that on me, haven't you?" And after a pause, he just cackled. That was Dad. I think I heard Marilyn groan in the background, too. It's possible. I heard that a lot. I'm fairly sure everyone here knows about my dad's generosity and his passion for learning and helping people and terribly, terribly disappointing baseball teams. So I'll talk about what I remember. I remember the jokes, good and bad. I remember riding around Madison on the back of a bright orange Vespa with a helmet that was like far too big for my 10-year-old head and nothing but my arms and legs to keep me from flying off onto the Beltline. I love that Vespa. I don't think my mom did. I'll remember going sledding on his trusty flexible flyer. There was this excellent, and by excellent I mean exceedingly steep and icy, sledding hill at the neighborhood park, and my dad had this technique that he called belly womping. Belly womping involved my dad, if you can imagine this, just picture it in your head, my dad laying on his stomach on the sled, and then me lying on his back, like 8-year-old me, and then 5-year-old Rachel laying on top of my back. And then with a few good pushes, he'd launch our precarious human pancake stack down the hill. We lost Rachel once, but she's fine. She's right here. Nothing was better than going sledding with my dad, because kids like nothing better than possible death. I'll remember our many ill-fated camping trips, torrential rain, leaky tents, incinerated marshmallows, and that gas station attendant in northern Wisconsin that we almost killed that one time, and we won't speak of that. All of it leading me to believe that we used up all of our camping karma as a family in those 40 years back in the desert, in the day. I'll remember going to so many Red Sox games at County Stadium, now Miller Park, that for a decent part of my childhood, I believed Milwaukee was the Red Sox home field. I'll remember going to Boston and getting ice cream cones with Jimmy's, and collecting periwinkles at Good Harbor Beach, and him teaching me to drive a manual, which I still do way too fast. I'll remember helping at the Rainbow Run, and my dad believing in me enough to let a 12-year-old design the official t-shirts, which were excellent, by the way. And at the Big Brothers and Big Sisters golf event every year, where he let me drive the golf cart like I was Vin Diesel in Fast and Furious, I just remember people yelling at us from the tees. I'll remember how much my dad loved events and parties and his many, many community groups and the Boys of Summer. And that one year that he got a part in the local production of Guys and Dolls, hence the music. I think I memorized Guys and Dolls at 8 years old. He absolutely came alive when there were people to entertain and interact with. As a kid, I didn't fully appreciate the truly staggering number of people in my dad's orbit. We couldn't go anywhere, literally anywhere, without him running into at least 2 or 3 friends. And they were all friends, not acquaintances, like friends. My dad collected people like others might collect stamps or antiques. And once you were in his collection, you were there for life. He had friendships that went back decades, 50, 60, 70 or more years. And not just people he talked to once a year. These were active friendships, each one special to him, and he'd nurture them with the care of any great collector. Taking care of people and trying to make their lives better and brighter was his calling. He was a loving father and brother and son, a devoted partner, an amazing uncle, a dedicated community member and leader, and without hyperbole, the best friend you could possibly imagine. At the end of my eulogy for my mom, I encouraged those who loved her to live by her example. And I think I'll do the same for Dad. Cherish deeply the people in your life, your friends, your family, your community. Make people a central source of joy in your life. Love them and support them and encourage them and uplift them. And if you practice this with even half the dedication that my father applied to it, I can guarantee that you will live a rich and fulfilling life surrounded by love. I miss you, DOD, and I love you.
I'd like to invite David Spar to the bema, please.
I wish I had gone before you. That's a tough act to follow. We all wish for a long life, but the irony is that the longer we live, the more loss we experience. Unfortunately, each tragic event fails to really prepare us for the next one. And the deaths of my Uncle Alan, the last surviving member of our family's generation, of that generation, it's a particularly difficult blow. I'm the oldest grandchild, which means that I was Alan's first nephew. When I was a tiny infant, and I'd just been adopted, my parents brought me to meet my new family at the synagogue, where they were all gathered for Alan Orenberg's bar mitzvah. It was supposed to be his big day, but this little pisher, as he would say, stole the show. Anyone else probably would have resented that, but not Alan. He loved me for it. And 60 years later, he returned the favor. When I got married to Jamie, he was the best man. And he gave a toast and a speech that was the best you ever heard. And he stole the show. But I loved him for that. As a teen, Alan loved to come visit us wherever we lived. And despite the fact that every time he showed up, my father made him repaint my swing set. During his high school years, we were living in New Jersey, and Alan was at Bordentown Military Academy, which was about an hour away. And when he would come over to visit, he and my father would take all the furniture in the living room and push them up against the walls, leaving this sort of central, like a precursor to an MMA octagon. And then they would wrestle. Now, Alan was younger, bigger, stronger than my father, and which means he almost always won. But my father never stopped trying. And Alan never let him win on purpose. But as fascinated as I was with Alan's size and strength, because at the time, I know it's hard to believe now, but I was a very puny and undersized child. I mean, Billy will tell you, we loved how he would use us as human barbells, and he would like press us up over his head. But his size and strength were not his most significant features. As been referred to before, his generosity was legendary. Because for me, not only did he paint my swing set, but he gave me his childhood bicycle, this Raleigh that literally weighed more than I did. It was made of like iron or something. He gave me his first flexible flyer sled. I'm sorry, Kate, I got the first one, that was taller than I was at the time. And he gave me his prized collection of historic postcards, like there were thousands of them, which I still have to this day. He renewed my subscription to National Geographic every year. It goes on and on. But his biggest gift was his untiring love and affection. As much as I idolized him as a child, I think I got the truest understanding of Alan as I grew older. I really appreciated and came to love how he was a father to Kate and Rachel, a grandfather to Minnie and Wyatt. He was a loving companion for so many years to his precious Marilyn. For years, I considered their relationship a role model, to the point where I didn't marry my first wife for many, many years because I said, like, well, if Alan and Marilyn, you know, they're the ideals, right? So why should I? He loved knowledge for its own, acquiring knowledge for its own sake. He loved unusual words. He loved to play golf, and he avidly followed baseball, as has been said. He was a walking encyclopedia of questionable jokes and obscure songs. I've never met anyone, as Kate put far better than I, who had a better talent for maintaining relationships. Looking around this room is proof of that. He welcomed into the family my now deceased first wife, Betsy, and later my current wife, Jamie, by taking them into his heart in a way that was so genuine and so powerful that after meeting Uncle Alan, they felt without question that they were now as much a part of the family as those of us who had lifelong credentials. Recently, Jamie said to me, "I don't think I even knew what a family could be until I met Uncle Alan." I think that pretty much says it all. Alan had that enviable ability to be instantly liked the moment he walked into a room. His gregariousness was real and organic, and he was genuinely kind to all he met. I can honestly say he was one of the few people in my life who never got angry or even impatient with me. Well, maybe Jamie, but I couldn't think of anyone better to help in a difficult situation. It wasn't that he was infallible or that he knew everything, but he knew how to listen. And whether he came up with a solution to the problem, more importantly, he would share his strength, support, comfort, and hope. Life can be strangely circular. For the last 23 years, I've been music director at that same synagogue where I met Alan Orenberg nearly 71 years ago. It meant so much to both of us when he would make the trip from Madison to hear me play and direct the choir for the High Holy Day services in that exact same room where he was bar mitzvahed. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur will be forever poignant without him. It's hard to believe there will be no more phone calls where he will tell me his latest joke and call me Boychik. I'll miss how he would spontaneously burst into a song whose lyrics, at least in his mind, were somehow related to something that was going on. I'll miss seeing in his eyes how proud he was of the man I had become. More than an uncle, he was a big brother, he was a role model, he was a best friend. I know how much he loved me. I know how much I loved him. I can no longer see him, hear him, or touch him, but Uncle Alan will be a part of me for the rest of my life.
we invite William Orenberg to join us.
I'm Bill Orenberg. I'm speaking on behalf of my wife, Joanne, my children, Ashley and her husband, Ryan, and their children, Cammie and Autumn, speaking on behalf of my son, Andrew, his wife, Rachel, and their children, Maya and Caden, who could not be here today, but loved their dear Unc. I have such wonderful memories of Uncle Unc, as we all lovingly referred to Uncle Alan. I absolutely treasured when he called me Boychik. However, I now realize that that wasn't special just for me. He was 15 when I was born, was a frequent visitor to our first home in Newton during his weightlifting days. Again, he taught Michael and I how to be human barbells that he would press up to the ceiling and we would giggle. He took us to Lars Anderson Park in Brookline to play football, and we loved when he'd yell to us to go long, and he'd send a spiraling pass as we'd scamper over those rolling hills, and each competing to land the ball in their arms. He often brought his little brother, who we all called Little Paul, and who he mentored through the Big Brother Association in his 20s. Foreshadowing his later involvement in the Dane County Big Brother Association here. At our summer cottage in Gloucester that our Nana and Papa rented in the summer, we loved when he'd show up with his friends from college, Alan Ashman, the Kaufman brothers, Noah Zager, and others, and I remember getting a thrill ride on a Porsche that one of them had. On a trip to Madison in 1983, where I was interviewing for a fellowship position, he treated me to a great night enjoying bratwurst and beer. He was always surrounded by and loved by friends and family, and was beloved for his ability to entertain with the best stories and jokes. In these later years, it was wonderful watching him enchant a new generation of great-great-nieces and nephews, singing about the old woman who swallowed the fly, and he knew every verse. But I so appreciated and respected his outspoken approach to social justice, whether it was through recommending a book he was reading and passionate about, or sharing his thoughts on social media. One of the enduring memories I'll carry is of his positivity and humor in the face of physical challenges as his health waned. He never wanted you to feel badly for him, and he always wanted to start and end a conversation on a light note. In one of our last conversations, I sneezed just towards the end, and he pulled out a tidbit of a song lyric from who knows where. But this was a typical example of his digging into his deep well of whimsy and smiles. If I had a nose full of nickels, I know just what I would do. And then I would sneeze all those nickels, achoo. Rest in peace, Unc.
We'd like to invite Mike Orenberg to come forward, please. Please do.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Orenberg, the youngest of the three nephews, and I'm here representing my beloved wife, Karen, in Sarasota, who couldn't be with us today, as well as my loving brother-in-law, Romero and their two daughters, Jenny and Grace, who are the wonderful family of my deceased loving sister, Diane. And also the community of Sarasota, who I was privileged to share with him 6 months out of every year, as well as the Kaufman friends who I've kept up with thanks to the introduction of Alan to them many, many years ago. You'll soon find out that none of us checked each other's notes, David, Billy, and I. We are here to pay honor to Alan Orenberg, devoted partner, father, grandfather, friend, brother, and overall mensch and great guy who was loved by everyone. Again, I should have checked the notes with Dave and Bill. But to me, he was Uncle Alan, or as I affectionately called him, Unc or Unky. And to him, I was his youngest nephew, or as he liked to call me, Boy Chick. Yeah, I know. I should have trademarked that way back when. Uncle Alan, my dad's younger brother, lived near us when we were growing up in Massachusetts. We were blessed by his presence in our young lives. I will briefly touch upon a few examples of his influence. I have very happy memories of playing ball with him at Los Anderson Park. We have similar memories, Bill. I learned one day of his role as a big brother to a little brother who came with him. That experience introduced me to Unc's lifelong commitment to such wonderful community organizations as Big Brothers and Big Sisters, Rotary Club, and his synagogues. In fact, when I called our rabbi at our Sarasota synagogue on the day that Unc passed away, the rabbi told me that he had just received a donation from Uncle Alan that he had literally just opened in the mail that day. At Nana and Papa's house, I was intrigued by the 25-pound barbell in a closet which Unc had regularly used to exercise. I looked forward to the time when I could lift them, and he later gave them to me, which I proceeded to use for many years until I got several hernias. His vast collection of postcards, which I know now where it landed, thanks, David. I knew I was never the favorite nephew. His vast collection of postcards, which were stored in a desk drawer in Papa's office, I guess before he gave them to you, highlighted the wonderful faraway places that he had visited during his trips to Europe and across the U.S. Later, I too got the travel bug, and we enjoyed sharing our stories and adventures. I was also the recipient of the amazing Louisville Slugger golf clubs and the green plaid golf bag, which he bought when he originally started playing golf in high school. While I was terrible at playing golf, I did eventually share his love for the game by caddying at a local club in Gloucester. Later on, we both enjoyed watching the big golf tournaments on TV and discussing the results afterwards. Over the years, I was able to visit Madison a few times. Unc proudly shared his love for his town by taking me to such landmarks as the zoo, the university, and most importantly, the bratwurst section at the local grocery, and my favorite, the meat jerky cheese curd quadrant at the state Capital Farmers Market. I never knew there were that many varieties. And last but not least, the Mustard Museum. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the poop on you hat, which he gave me as a memento of our visit, but I would have loved to have worn it today. During the past years that we have lived in Sarasota, my wife Karen and I eagerly looked forward to Marilyn and Unc's return for the fall-winter season. Each year, thanks to their loving generosity, we enjoyed many wonderful shows at the Sarasota Cabaret and Black Theater, as well as many delicious meals at their lovely home. When David and Jamie were in Miami a few years ago for David's performance at a local synagogue, Uncle Alan and I enjoyed a fun weekend boys' road trip across Alligator Alley to attend. It was a wonderful opportunity for Unc and I to talk and bond even more. Uncle Alan never missed a birthday or anniversary. He would always try to attend every event in person if possible, but he always remembered to send a card or give us a call for special occasions. Most importantly, I looked forward every day to checking my phone for Unc's daily emails. He enhanced our lives by sharing his nuggets of humor, current events, entertainment, culture, family news, and Jewish history. In fact, I always kept my Yiddish dictionary handy just to make sure I could translate as needed. He brightened the lives of everyone he touched with his humor and good cheer, and made the world a better place with his kindness, compassion, and community service. I miss him and will forever.
Jerome Dempsey, please come on up.
How many boy chicks are there in the room? Marilyn, Kate, Rachel, Wyatt, Min, B. I'm with you. So in the mid-'70s, I was a volunteer Big Brother in the Big Brother program here. And the board asked me to come to kind of give them some insight as to what the current status of being a volunteer in the program was like. I was pretty nervous to go there. I mean, on the board at the time was the Chief Justice of Wisconsin Supreme Court, guys like Alan Orenberg. I was very nervous walking into that meeting at the local public library. But the first guy who came over, I'd never met him before. Well, how you doing, fella? Yeah. Introduced me around to everybody. And so for the next 45 years, I doubt if there was a week or a week and a half went by where we didn't have a meaningful interaction of many kinds. So when you know somebody that long and in that kind of depth, you get to know them pretty well, and they get to know you, and you get to know their value system. So let me share just 4 aspects of what I admired about Alan. Friendship, and how he viewed friendship, not acquaintances. If you were Alan's friend, you were in there. We were an odd couple, very odd couple. He was very neat. He had a lot of social graces, and he loved good restaurants. I failed every one of those tests. And we went on a lot of trips together, a couple of dozen over the years. Golfing, usually spring training baseball was involved, and good food, of course, when Alan was along. So that's when I recognized these characteristics of his. So just he and I were on one in a place called Biloxi, Mississippi. What a dump we got into. And I think the reason we were there is because it had a casino, and Alan was trying out some new system that one of Marilyn's relatives had for the crap game. He lost. But I noticed we were in the hotel, and I came back in the afternoon, and Alan was remaking the bed that the maid had already made. In the morning, I thought, wow, we're in trouble. So we kind of agreed to spare each other's problems in this area. So, for example, he would take a break from me during the day, take the rental car and listen to opera, go for a ride, I'd go for a run. When we were at Fenway Park together, that was a very special time, about 20 years ago. We went on the Ducks, we went around Boston. He got to show me his town that he loved. Everything that the guide told us, Alan, in a low voice, would correct. I got to take him to a real dump of a bar called the Baseball Bar, not too far from Fenway. If I promised that we could go out to the famous seafood restaurant in Boston and have his lobster. That picture with Alan out with that apron around his neck was something I cherish to this day. Social graces. if you had Alan over to your home or anything that you were hosting, within 48 hours, back came a full, if not a half-page email telling you what a wonderful evening it was and how wonderful it was. I teased him incessantly, and I couldn't, that was one that I just loved, because I got to the point where if I was at his place for that, as I was backing out of the driveway, I would email him to beat him. I was even so bad at teasing him that if he was at my place, as soon as he would leave, I'd email him and thank him for coming. Man, he had pretended to ignore it, but I know I got him. Didn't I, Marilyn? I got him. Marilyn knows. Share your friends. Alan really believed in that. I'm from Canada. I had a lot of Canadian friends who would come down. Alan became extremely close friends with each one of them. And actually, he became friends even independently of me with a lot of these people. That was really special. His organization of groups, like our Boys of Summer Trips, that went for many, many years. Milwaukee and Chicago for baseball and food and laughs. And that was Alan's doing, his organizing those. He loved being a Jew. Man, he loved it. Every aspect of it. And he shared that. I'm not a Jew. I'm agnostic, but not with Alan. He introduced me to the rabbi in Sarasota. I've been down there 20 years going with him. And it got to the point I ended up going to the rabbi's lunch, many of them, and meeting the rabbi and his associates and his wife. And I got to really appreciate what Alan saw in Judaism and the Jewish family. You guys are special, very special. There were tough times, too, as friends. That first heart attack, Alan in his early 40s, man, and I'm same age, that really hit hard. I remember the next morning going to the Madison General Hospital, and at the ICU, and in his room was a rabbi, and me, and him. And that look on Alan's face, this was one scared guy. And he took the rabbi's hand, and he took my hand. And you could just, we didn't say anything. You could just feel the friendship and the devotion he had. I think that was something that really bonded us. Second category, as an entertainer. I'm not going to give all the thousands of examples of that, just a few. So one early on, I don't know, 45 years ago or something, I was like the volunteer president of the board of Big Brothers, and Alan worked there as executive. Everybody knows that. So we were to go to the National Big Brother Board meeting to see if we could pick up some tips on fundraising. We were broke all the time here. I mean, we had a golf tournament that made about 20 cents. We were always begging United Way. So we were out there to learn some things. And we were staying in a hotel in Kansas City, and that's about 1979. And we had breakfast, got on the elevator in the morning, and I think we're about the 25th floor. And there were about 10 people on the elevator. Well, it's an audience, right? It's an audience. And I hadn't heard, I hadn't heard a lot of these jokes before. All of a sudden it started. This booming voice from the back of the elevator. So there was a rabbi, a priest. You notice that Alan never, in his jokes, never said, would you like to hear the one about it? Enough said. Kate mentioned the Sun Prairie Players. Oh my God, that was something. Guys and dolls. Alan played Nicely Johnson. But he memorized the parts of everybody else in that. I took my family, there's my kids down there. They came with me to see that. He knew all the songs. How about this one, everybody? after dinner, mid-dinner, before dinner, at wherever it was, in a restaurant. It didn't matter. I got the horse right here. His name was Paul Revere. And this fella says that if the weather's clear, he'll do. There's about 8 little verses to that about can do. He insisted on every one. And of course, he'd do that everywhere. Even, third example, and the last one, even when he didn't mean to be hilarious, he was. Alan attended a number of, especially in the 80s and 90s, number of Thanksgiving celebrations and Christmas at our place. And I'm a teacher at the university and had a lot of foreign students that came to train with me to learn to be scientists, and they were at these dinners. Alan, especially the Thanksgiving, he loved to tell all the foreign people the Thanksgiving story, the American Thanksgiving story. The best one was when we had brand new 2 families, so that's 3 kids, husband, wife, from Japan. Their English at that point in their training was very, very poor, but very, very polite people. So Alan had them all sit down. I know my kids were there. They heard every word of this, and he started to tell about the pilgrims coming. They had no idea what he was talking about. But of course they'd say, oh, really? And that just encouraged Alan all the more. It was a good 35 minutes of that Thanksgiving story through their whole. By the end, we were all laughing so hard. I remember him and Beth. It was, so even when he didn't intend to be, and of course, I'd remind him of that perhaps he might want to shorten it for the next Thanksgiving. No, that didn't happen. Thirdly, Alan's passion for others. There's an old adage that says, you may be the most powerful cat in the room, but I'll judge you on what you do with those, on what you will do for those with less power than you. Alan Orenberg was not an indifferent man to those, especially those with less advantage in life. That, I mean, just his association with the big brothers and sisters. I was with him on many occasions where he'd be meeting with mothers of the kids. These families behind these little brothers and little sisters were in desperate straits, most of them. Not just financially, but socially, emotionally, intellectually, and what they're doing to these kids. Alan was beautiful with these mothers, absolutely beautiful. When we had the problem with the gay community in Madison, because of a policy we had, I was president of the board then. That was a great introduction. And Alan and I were required, really, were needed. We met with the gay community, several of them, early morning breakfast people. The empathy he had for the case these people were making really impressed me. I learned so much through that. But it was genuine. It wasn't just because he was representing our agency, a genuine empathy. Again, I learned so much from that. Always, the question of anti-Semitism always was on Alan's mind, and he would bring it up. But the last 10 years, he got very much involved with racism. He read thoroughly on it. He wanted to discuss it at length. I know of a couple of personal interventions he had. He purchased a number of textbooks for minority kids in classes that didn't have them. Very much involved in great depth with that. Again, his caring for those that are less fortunate. And finally, Alan's family and his pride. Kate and Rachel, how much he talked and bragged about these kids to me, their professional accomplishments, but primarily their capabilities as a mother and an aunt, their devotion to the kids. And of course, the grandkids. They were Alan's pride and joy. That was special. David, the nephew, his musical accomplishments. I'd get maybe a video a month of David's work. And as I was telling David, with an immediate follow-up the next day to make sure you'd heard it with some detailed questions. He loved David's accomplishments. Just, it was wonderful to hear. I don't know how many great nephews, great nieces. I've never heard of people having so many. How many greats can you go out to? But he never saw a bar mitzvah he didn't like. He went to a lot of them, didn't he? Go way out east. Oh my God, it was great. And the details we'd hear about them. And finally, I think the great joy of our friendship and the friendship that Marilyn and Alan had with Barbara, my wife Barbara and I, was that we got to observe the entire almost 4 decades of the romance of Alan and Marilyn. Marilyn was on the Big Brother board, and Alan was single at the time, about the mid-'80s, and he tricked Marilyn into thinking it was a special meeting of the Big Brother people, but it was a one-on-one date. Tricked her. He wasn't, okay, I heard all these nice things. He wasn't always that honest when it came to affairs of the heart. And that went well, and he would tell me how things are going. And this, what do you think? Oh, I said, oh my God, Marilyn Grace, jeez, how's a slob like you getting a great cow like that? And then in 1986, those of you who are Boston people might remember that wonderful World Series between the Mets and the Red Sox. God, just another huge disappointment to us Red Sox fans, of course. And but Barbara and I and Alan and Marilyn watched every game together. And that's a lot of hours for time. It went 7. The 6th game is the one we all remember, right? The ball between, never mind, okay. And so, but I could see that was when I really saw the devotion Alan had toward Marilyn. It was really special, and I thought, wow, how wonderful that my friend has found this wonderful woman to spend, obviously, what it looked like then, the rest of his life with. And here we are. I constantly admonished him, don't screw this up. But when I look back now, it's very clear that as much as Alan needed Marilyn in his life, she needed Alan in hers. On behalf of his friends, my dear, thank you for enriching his life and so beautifully. You are indeed the wind beneath his wings. I'll miss my friend.
And we invite Gary Tritz to the bema, please.
Good afternoon. Alan is my friend. I'm thrilled to honor him. We met about 30 years ago, so I'm one of the recent additions to his clan. It's when he tried his hand at real estate sales, and I was the office manager. And our conversations, we quickly realized that we had so much in common that we just continued to stay in touch ever since. Someone had already mentioned that, you know, once he made a friend, he stuck with it for life. We mentioned baseball, one of his favorite pastimes. He knew the game, he remembered the games that he had seen. He relished looking forward to the upcoming season. Before my time with him, he often spoke about the boys of summer. I know they travel extensively with Jerry. And they would root for, the Brewers or whoever was, playing against the Yankees, I guess. Obviously, he was a diehard Red Sox fan. And he loved reminiscing about the games and the hijinks that, he and his friends, his buddies, would have during the games. He enjoyed the practical joke. He loved the one or two line zinger, word play. One of them that I remembered, he would say that, as I've grown older, I've learned that pleasing everyone is impossible, but irritating everyone is a piece of cake. Or that common sense is like deodorant. People who need it the most never seem to use it. But his jokes never made fun of another person. If somehow the purpose of the joke or the brunt of the joke had to fall on someone, he would always make it himself. He was self-effacing that way. He would say, I'm not saying that I'm old and worn out, but I make sure that I'm nowhere near the curb on trash day. Or, I haven't gotten anything done today. I've been in the produce department trying to open that stupid plastic bag. One that we can probably all relate to is, it turns out that being senior mostly means asking Siri how to do stuff. Some of his jokes would comment on the conditions of mankind, the relationships between men and women. God promised men that good and obedient wives would be found in all corners of the world, and then he made the world round. And he laughed and laughed and laughed. Or that's hard to believe that he had a phone once that was attached to the wall, and when it rang, he picked it up without knowing who was there. Enough of those. I'm also part of his poker group. You probably all have heard of that. Once a month we get together at a member's home and we eat and play some cards, and mostly we chat. We talk about politics or whatever the latest sporting event is, history, life lessons. Our last game was just a week before he passed. He was the big winner. He took home about $10, He fleeced us all. One of the comments was that he probably passed then so he wouldn't have to pay us back later at a later game. So I'm sure he had never thought that. He was generous with his time, with his money, with his sharing of his story of his life. He was always thinking about the people around him. He sent birthday cards, that was mentioned here already. He must have spent hours in the aisles of the birthday cards, just collecting them. And it demonstrated that he would think of us every day. It's not just on our birthdays, but he was out there collecting these cards and having very, very pertinent, very meaningful cards sent to us. My friend Dan and I both have birthdays very near to the day that Alan passed. And both of us received our cards on the day after he had passed. It's as if he had willed from the grave that we would receive a memento from Alan to us on our birthdays. He was a matchmaker, not so much, of romantic relationships, but deep friendships, kindred spirits. Most of my close friends today are people that Alan introduced me to. And Alan knew everybody. He could enter the room and immediately point out several other people that he knew. And it wasn't just celebrity. It wasn't that, he knew them, but they didn't know him. No, this was a deep friendship that he knew and they knew, and he loved introducing people, putting their hands together and suggesting that, you should meet this person, you should talk to them, you should engage with them. When he wasn't zinging one-liners, he would seamlessly shift from the happenings of the moment to a joke he had heard, a dozen or 2 dozen years ago. We've all had those moments where we forget a name or some detail that we know that we should all know. when Alan would experience that, he would immediately also remember the story of the couple that was, attending a dinner party, and the men and women each huddled to their respective corners to chat away. One of the men is telling the other men about this wonderful restaurant he and his wife went to last week. Great food, wonderful service, fantastic prices. One of his buddies then asked, "Well, what's the name of the restaurant?" "Oh," he said, stammering, "I hate it when I forget names. Help me out. What's that flower with the long stem and usually red petals and the thorns?" The man says, "Oh, you mean a rose?" And he says, "Yeah, thanks," as he yells across the room, "Hey, Rose, what was the name of that restaurant we all went to?" Another sharing of Alan's stories is the detailed story. They were never crude or vulgar. They were witty, insightful. The detailed, it would lure the listener in. He'd fill your mind with all sorts of different possibilities of where this particular story might be going to, and then with a twinkle in his eye, he would snap a punchline. He shared this story with me for about the 12th time, just before he died, about a week before he died, that he had learned the backstory about the passing of the Catholic Pope in Rome. And as is their practice, a conclave of cardinals met in the Sistine Chapel to nominate and vote for a successor to the Roman Catholic Church. There were two finalists that year that everyone focused on. Both were cardinals in the church. Both were liturgical scholars, Antonio Scola from Venice and Mario Benedicto of Milan. And it wasn't clear if either of these cardinals could muster the 2/3 majority needed to be elected to the position of the Pope. The two cities, Venice and Milan, have been in competition with each other for 1,000 years, and the population of each of those cities would be honored to have the Pope come from those cities. Antonio Scola was the clear favorite of the cardinals. In addition to his knowledge of the liturgy and workings of the church, he had served on many committees with his fellow cardinals. He was genuinely liked by everyone. And that fact alone made the results of the voting so surprising, because the cardinals chose Mario Benedicto of Milan as the new pope. It seems that even though Antonio Scola was loved and respected by all the cardinals, they couldn't come to grips with calling the new leader of their church Pope Scola. Based on what I've heard, I'm sure that Alan would be proud. And with that, dear Alan, I say good night.
So continue to share stories like those and others. Just a few logistic notes. We're headed toward the end of our worship of our service today. When we conclude, what we'd like to ask the community to do is to exit these doors sort of toward the forward part of the sanctuary, make a left turn, and go down the hallway to the far entrance of our social hall, where you'll be greeted for a meal of condolence. We have to turn the room around a little bit, so we want to move in this direction so we can set up some more tables and chairs for this outpouring of support this afternoon. Also, as you see on the program, it says that the bima is going to remain open so that other folks want to share stories and sentiments and fond memories. Please come to this microphone, because some of that's going to be live streamed. And so this is the place where the camera will be. So please come right about here if you'd like to do that. And I understand you'll be heard back in the social hall when that happens. And again, please embrace Alan's family this afternoon and after today as well. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we'll remember him. At the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we'll remember him. At the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we'll remember him. At the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, we'll remember him. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we'll remember him. At the beginning of the year and when it ends, we'll remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we'll remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we'll remember him. When we have decisions that are difficult to make, we'll remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, will remember him. When we have achievements that are based on him, we'll remember him. As long as we live, he too will live, for he is now a part of us as we remember him. We praise you, eternal our God, sovereign of the universe, who forms us in the divine image, who nourishes and sustains us in goodness, who causes all of us to die, and who implants within us immortal life. We praise you, O God, who is the true judge. You are forever mighty Adonai, eternal one, that is. You give life to all. You sustain life through love, giving life to all through great compassion, supporting the fallen, healing the sick, freeing the captive, keeping faith with those who sleep in the dust. Who is like you, source of mighty acts? Who resembles you, a sovereign who takes and gives life, causing deliverance to spring up from the earth? Blessed are you, eternal, who implants within us immortal life. For El Malay Rachamim and for the Kaddish, we invite the community to rise. El Malay Rachamim Shochein Bamromim Hamatzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina B'ma'alot Kedoshim U'Tehorim Kezohar Harakia Mazhirim L'nishmat Avraham Reuven Ben Hyman Vesisel Shehalach Leolamo Ba'al Harachamim Yastirehu Beseter Kenafav Leolamim Veyitzror Bitzror Achaim Et Nishmato Adonai Hu Nachalato Veyanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkavo V'nomar Amen. In English, O God, full of compassion, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence, along with all the righteous and holy ones, to our beloved Alan Orenberg, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge forever in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And we say, Amen. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah be'alma di v'rach irutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam ul'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudsha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru. Amen. May God send peace to all who mourn and comfort those who are bereaved. And let us say, Amen.